Good evening. The tsunami toll is now reaching levels no heart or mind can truly comprehend. Some authorities are predicting the number of deaths will reach 100,000 by the weekend.
More than 11,000 people are now thought to have been killed in southern Asia after an undersea earthquake sent enormous waves rolling across the Indian Ocean. The quake measured 8.9 on the Richter scale, the biggest in the world for 40 years. Waves up to 10 meters high engulfed the coasts of many countries.
Tens of millions of tons of water, unthinkably powerful, are driven onto shores across the Indian Ocean. The waves started at speeds of as much as 500 miles an hour. Nothing and no one can stand against them. The Husseini family are getting ready for a wedding. Then the tsunami waves hit northwestern Indonesia. By 8:50, less than an hour after the waves were launched, the Husseini's town of Banda Aceh has almost vanished.
Coming again! Coming again!
At the resort of Phuket in Thailand, 250 miles to the north, the tourists are running for their lives.
Oh my God!
It's half an hour after the waves hit Indonesia.
Oh shit!
Sri Lanka, 2 hours later and 1,000 miles further on.
There's more coming.
This was Sri Lanka as the seawater flooded inland. Thousands have lost their lives here. And government officials say more than 1 million people, around 5% of the island's population, have been affected. The floodwater came inland for several hundred meters. Some victims were washed away as friends and relatives screamed. Sri Lanka's Natural Disaster Management Centre says it may be the worst disaster they've experienced.
Entire swathes of southeastern India were devastated. In each of the countries around the Indian Ocean where the waves hit, it was one of the worst disasters in living memory, a catastrophe. These are countries where the wealthy come to holiday and the poor cling to a precarious existence at the best of times. Tsunami waves made no distinction between rich and poor, foreigners and locals. Children suffered particularly because they couldn't run away. In country after country, the emergency facilities, always limited, buckled and virtually collapsed under the strain. The true scale of the disaster is only now becoming plain, but we still don't have any clear idea who's survived and who hasn't. We don't even know roughly how many casualties there have been, and we won't find out for some days. It'll be a long time before the floods give up all the bodies of the dead. In the expensive resorts where foreigners were taking the holiday of a lifetime, the shock and grief were no less strong. Some could scarcely understand how they'd survived.
As the water gushed through, it filled the room with water and I was almost drowned. And I just stood there and prayed.
Across the entire region, people are dealing with the bodies of the dead according to their own religious traditions. It's been a reminder of the immense destructive power which natural forces can exert, and of our feebleness. It even briefly disturbed the rotation of the earth. Yet it's the individual cases that stay in our memories, like this husband and wife who found their children among the piles of bodies. Now they're taking them for burial, silently and alone.
And here is the moment when the ocean starts to spill onto the street. This is amateur video from holidaymakers in Thailand at the resort of Phuket. And captured on the same camera, one of the waves, its power about to be revealed. For many tourists in southern Thailand, this was a paradise. Not anymore. Survivors here evacuated on the island of PP, well known to many as the perfect setting for the movie The Beach. And from a tourist in the Maldives, this account of her survival.
We didn't realize, we just saw a water plane coming up and towards the building and people from outside screaming, and then we saw the water come in the building and very fast.
Pictures from Indian television show the water overwhelming large areas of the coast. Hundreds of fishermen are among those reported missing. India's Prime Minister says everything possible will be done to help those affected.
Sea that should be turquoise is muddy brown, threatening, tainted. And where villages stood, almost nothing is left. Nature feels disturbed, unbalanced. Sri Lanka's coast has been its fortune. That's why so many people were here when the tsunami hit.
What really strikes you from the air is the scale of the devastation. It just goes on for mile after mile after mile. We've been in this helicopter for about half an hour, going along the coast of Sri Lanka, and right along there, there's the debris left by destroyed businesses, destroyed homes, and destroyed lives as well.
And this is what the sea did in one of those villages. Habaradua wasn't a smart resort. It was a quiet place where people made a living from tourists who came to dive and surf. The wave tore into the heart of the village. Now they're digging for what the sea left behind, relics of lives that had seemed to be getting better. Bodies are buried as they're identified. Ones without names are left at the roadside, decaying in the wet heat, in the hope that someone will claim them. Mr. Kumar is looking for his 4-year-old daughter. Just before the wave came, he saw her playing outside their back door. He's already buried his older daughter and his wife. He doesn't expect to find her alive.
On a beach in Thailand, the crowds flee in fear as a wave approaches. This did not turn out to be one of the really big ones to strike. But the power of these waves has caused devastation here and along thousands of miles of coastline across the entire region. The waves, known as tsunami, can move at up to 400 miles an hour. Out in the ocean, they aren't usually that high. But look inside at what happens as the waves approach the coast. The peak of the waves is forced upwards. Today they were several stories high, and behind them comes a vast and destructive mass of water.
Up to 3,000 people, tormented by rumors that more tsunamis are coming, stay at the local Buddhist temple. They get some help from the monks and from well-wishers, but they say they've had nothing from the government. Habaradua is a single village. Across this country, 1 million people have lost their homes. If aid is still arriving this slowly next week, it will get worse.
If you could smell this, you would be retching. Banda Aceh's main hospital, overflowing. A place of filth and despair. And time is running out. 6-year-old Maula has been here since yesterday, untreated. Gangrene is setting in fast. No one seems to care, says her brother. Look at her wounds. They've started rotting. Outside, grave digging now on an industrial scale. Another truckload every 2 minutes. No names, no ceremony. But it's not fast enough. The streets still festering with corpses. The dead seem to outnumber the living. But there is little time to mourn. The battle for survival here is getting harder by the day. Regular water supplies are contaminated. and relief still scarce. Tonight, thousands of families will again sleep out in the open, in the middle of their devastated city. And this was the moment their lives changed forever. The wave's relentless progress captured on an amateur video. People clinging to the roofs for safety. But other towns have simply vanished. This was Malabo, population 95,000, number of survivors unknown. Indonesia was the closest country to Sunday's epicenter. It was hit first and hardest. Now it is hell on earth. International aid cannot come fast enough. The horrors here are beyond belief. The waves that did this came without warning, but the next disasters here are now entirely predictable. Dysentery, gangrene, cholera, and epidemics which could kill as many people as the original tsunami.
Sri Lanka has declared a national disaster and is appealing for international aid. And aftershocks remain a possibility.
This is what one of Thailand's most popular resorts looks like today. Phuket, especially busy with British holidaymakers at this time of year. Now they are tending the injured. Tourists helping one another while they wait for medical assistance. At least 20 foreign nationals are thought to have died here. There are reports of holidaymakers swept from the beach.
We saw this enormous tidal wave approaching the beach, and people started to run, and suddenly it was complete chaos, people running and screaming as the wave hit.
This is what brings so many here. This island was the setting for the Hollywood movie The Beach, the stunning scenery a magnet for tourists. But this is what's been left behind, a picture repeated across the areas that have been hit. Holiday operators believe there could be more than 10,000 Britons in the region.
The tour operators are making contact with them as quickly as they can, trying to find ways of getting them to safety, and eventually, of course, over the next 2 days to fly them home back to the UK.
But with communications cut in many places, it's hard to assess just how many foreigners are still missing, especially those not travelling with organised tours.
It's actually a much trickier position for the many thousands of British backpackers who are in the area. They kind of have to fend for themselves, and if in an area where sanitation, water, even things like basic food in short supply, that is a very, very tricky position to be in.
Tourists with travel plans over the coming days are being told to contact their tour operators. A number of flights to the region from Britain tonight will be going out empty to bring holidaymakers back home.
As coastline searches continue, thousands more bodies are discovered. Towns that once had 10,000 people living there now have just a handful. Whole areas have literally been wiped off the map. More than half of those who've died have come from Indonesia. In Aceh, 1 in 4 people have been killed. Victims are being buried without ceremony or care. Body bags and coffins are in short supply. This was supposed to be a wedding video. The celebrations cut short as the family battled to stay above the rising waterline. 5 days on, the remote Andaman Islands have only just been reached. Homes have been replaced by rubble. Families don't have time to mourn. For those lucky enough to be spared, survival is now their greatest challenge. 5 million now are without basic essentials, a roof over their heads, food and water. There is no end in sight. As each hour passes, the news worsens and the death toll grows ever higher. Aid is on its way, but it's slow. The agencies just can't cope with the geographic scale and the level of demand. The UN says it will still take at least another 2 to 3 days to begin to respond properly. This is not a short-term relief programme. Livelihoods have been lost. It will take years and billions of pounds to rebuild the 11 countries affected.
Hardest hit the island of Phuket and the much smaller island of Phi Phi nearby. Although the effects of this earthquake were felt as far away as here in the capital, Bangkok. It's those islands that were hit so hard by these walls of water where we've seen the greatest numbers of deaths and casualties. The latest information we have from British officials is that at least 10 Britons are in hospital. Now that number is likely to rise over the next few hours. It's still the early hours of the morning here, and as I speak, consular officials are travelling around the main hospitals in Phuket, trying to establish just exactly who's been injured and who might be missing.
And what are the emergency services managing to do in the worst hit areas? Have they managed to get to all the areas that have been affected?
No, they haven't. Now, one of the biggest problems that they've got is a lack of power. When these walls of water hit these beaches, they didn't just do so much damage to the unfortunate people that were on the beach or swimming in the hotel pools on the side of the beach, but of course they dumped all this debris onto the streets and in many cases tore down power lines. So part of the problem that they've had working through the night has just been establishing power. Then you've got this second issue, which has been touched on a little earlier, of just trying to contact these outlying islands. You have to remember that this area, as well as those big islands that we've been focusing on, there are lots of little settlements, and in the next 2 or 3 hours, as first light comes, one of the priorities for the emergency services, for the Thai Army and Navy forces who've been mobilised to help in this relief effort, will be to try to contact those outlying areas just to try to find out the scale of the devastation there.
What stories are you hearing, Chris, from people who actually survived this? It must have been an absolutely terrifying experience.
Well, indeed, and I think some of the most remarkable are from people who were on holiday and who were just doing the most normal things, sitting there having breakfast with their children. There was one Swedish tourist who said she was having breakfast on the beach with her husband when one of her 3 children raced over, crying out and being followed by this huge wave. The family followed other foreign tourists who were evacuated to the hills. They stayed there for hours without food. I can tell you it was a very warm day in southern Thailand today. They said locals brought them water. Finally, they returned to the seaside, and then the Thai people came again and shouted, "The waves are coming, the waves are coming," and they had to drop their food and run off into the hills again. It's those kind of stories that give you a real idea of just how horrible for these people that were having these amazing Christmas vacations in these beautiful white sandy beaches, turquoise waters, and they've just had them turned into a nightmare.
I believe you were in your hotel on Boxing Day morning when you heard screaming outside. Tell us what happened next.
Morning to you, Jackie. Yeah, as you said, just heard some screaming. I got up, I was in bed, and I went to the door and saw water gushing down the path from the beach. Initially I thought it was just a flood from the heavy rain the night before, but then within seconds I realised it was far more serious. Within seconds the water was up around her knees.
Yeah, I was going to say, it went up to about 7 feet high in about a minute or something, I believe.
Yeah, well, the flood came in a bit to about knee deep, and then started to drop down a bit, and then a few seconds later it was up 7 feet deep, as you said.
So you all managed to get onto the roof, and what happened then? I believe you saw lots of people being hurt, and it must have been just horrendous for you.
Well, there was no staff in the hotel; they'd all gone. So it was all the holidaymakers that were helping one another out, and we were trying to get as many people to the roof of the hotel as quickly as possible. People were trapped in their rooms for some reason. I don't know if it was just panic or had somehow been locked in, but we had to kick doors open and let people out because we didn't know how high the water was going to rise. There was screaming, shouting, there was injured bodies in the hotel, cars floating around, jet skis had blown in from the beach and boats. You know, the place was in a horrific mess.
I'm sure it was. And Paul, the most horrendous thing really out there was that you almost instantly saw people taking advantage of the disaster, trying to profit from it.
Well, basically what it was, we didn't really sort of pay any attention to that at first, but as things were floating by, people were chasing after them and basically taking whatever they could for themselves, really.
And how are you both now? I mean, it must be very difficult to get over something like that. I know it's only been a few days. How are you both feeling now?
Well, there was 8 of us, and we've all reacted to it in a different way. For me, it's helped to talk about it, and you know, the more I talk about it, the easier it becomes, and possibly, you know, is helping me get over it. I know a lot of my friends have turned their phones off. Like, they can't talk about it. They can't discuss what we went through. It's too emotional for them, and we reacted in. I suppose we've all reacted in different ways.
Very understandable. How did you manage to get home?
Oh, that was that night. We had to. The hardest part was staying there. You know, we couldn't get out of the town, so we had to stay there for the night. And the following morning, we were up at. You know, nobody slept. Obviously, we slept. We sought refuge 13 floors high in a derelict building. And then in the morning, you know, at sunrise, we were all up. We were waiting on the streets. We went back to the hotels, which had been burgled in the night. The locals had been in, ransacked the rooms and taken a lot of the stuff. But we managed to rescue things like I couldn't find my passport, but I managed to find my tickets, and a lot of my goods had been stolen from one of the rooms that we put all our stuff in that we managed to save. Although that's not relevant. And then we got taxis back to the airport, but even the taxi drivers, you know, the prices had gone up, you know, tenfold, because they knew you were so desperate to get out.
Matthew, what is the latest that you have on the casualty figures there?
The latest figures in the state of Tamil Nadu are about 1,700 people being killed. There's also hundreds more in neighbouring states, Andhra Pradesh, and even round on the west coast of India in Kerala, a place where many tourists like to go. There have been deaths reported there as well.
And are there many more people still reported missing?
Yes, there are. In Andhra Pradesh, at least 400 fishermen were said to have gone out to sea or were out at sea this morning. They're definitely still missing. Some fishermen's bodies have been washed ashore throughout the day, but I don't think anyone has really got a sense of what's happened to all the people who were out at sea when this struck. The Indian government is doing everything it can. It's describing itself as being on a war footing now, and it's sending helicopters and boats and doing everything it can to find out what is going on. But there are definitely still people missing, and on the more remote parts of the coast, it may be that people are missing or they may be dead, but really nobody's getting very much information from those remote villages as of yet.
We've heard terrible reports from the area where you are of many, many bodies being washed up on the beaches. How are they coping with the sheer number of bodies there?
I think nerves are a bit frayed and fraught at the end of the day here. In the hospitals, there's some pretty chaotic scenes with people rushing around, wailing, trying to get any news they can about missing relatives. I was down on the main beach here in Madras just an hour or two ago, and again, pretty sort of chaotic and slightly tense atmosphere. A lot of people hanging around, some of them looking pretty shocked, others sort of just trying to find out what's going on, and very kind of sort of nervous atmosphere even now. So people are still struggling to come to terms with what happened. I mean, it's just an incredible shock to this city.
The world has never faced a humanitarian disaster on this scale in peacetime. The challenge now is to help the survivors in 10 ravaged countries where infrastructure has been wrecked and the dead cannot be buried fast enough. Wealthy countries are beginning to respond.
We are committed to helping the affected countries in the difficult weeks and months that lie ahead.
President Bush wants the US to lead a core group of nations to coordinate relief. These countries have already pledged significant funds. The US itself is giving £18 million, Japan £15 million. Australia has pledged £11 million, and India, one of the victims itself, has already launched its own massive response, sending large numbers of helicopters, aircraft and ships to help the relief efforts in neighbouring countries, and deploying 4,000 troops. Britain has pledged £15 million, and ordinary people have also responded quickly. Oxfam received £200,000 yesterday, more than it's ever got in one day. And with the launch of the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal tonight, even more donations are expected. Every aspect of this tragedy is difficult to take in. The UN estimates that at least 5 million people are now without the 3 basics of life: water, food and shelter.
The pledges are there because we know they're there. The UN has immediate needs and we know what they are, but matching the two together at this crucial juncture is quite difficult.
Yet even if the aid pledges are honoured, this won't be the end of the story. Relief efforts between the UN, aid agencies, donor governments and the affected nations will have to be coordinated, and all of them will have their own ideas about how the money should be spent.
The problem that will arise is that each country will have the same demands on what will be a limited resource. And so the UN may need to prioritise which country gets the resources and in what quantities.
Emergency relief can only help in the short term. One of the cruelest ironies of this disaster is that it has befallen some of the poorest people in the world. Decades of development wiped out in a moment. Once the world's collective shock has subsided, they will need long-term reconstruction to rebuild their communities.
This is the first attempt by scientists to show in pictures how the tsunami waves travelled from the earthquake's epicenter off the Sumatran coast, across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and on thousands of miles to the Somali coast in Africa, travelling huge distances and with so devastating an impact. The waves may initially appear small, but once forced up onto the land, the destructive power of the immense volume of water travelling at speed is suddenly all too clear. The local shape of the coastline is critical. Any inlet means the waves land as dangerous spinning torrents. Just a short distance away, if the coastline is smooth, the same waves can prove more benign. The earthquake was at the boundary of 2 of the giant sections that make up the Earth's surface, the tectonic plates. One plate moves constantly beneath the other, creating huge strain, which eventually ruptures. Here, the top Burma plate suddenly slipped, pushing a huge volume of water above it upwards. Like the flick of a rope, this sent waves hurtling towards the coast at about 600 kilometers an hour. The waves were so destructive because the quake itself happened near the surface, just 10 kilometers under the seabed. Any deeper and its pent-up energy would have disappeared underground. As it was, this energy had nowhere to go but up into the mass of water above. The death toll is so high because people on the ground had no warning. Unlike communities around the rich Pacific basin, the poor coastal regions of the Indian Ocean are unprotected. Today, the Indian government said it will install a network of sensors and satellites to detect and warn of tsunami waves, giving people vital time to reach high ground. It may seem too little, too late, but many thousands of lives could yet be saved. There's a suggestion that such massive earthquakes come in pairs. There may now be another in this very region sooner than expected.
There's some evidence that earthquakes here occur in pairs. There was one in 1797, another huge one in 1833. So there may be another big one within decades. We may have centuries to wait, we may have any decades, but it's critical that a warning system gets up and running now because something may happen again in the relatively near future.
The scientist who built the tsunami computer model says cash-strapped governments are reluctant to pay for such a system.
Only a week ago, it would be very difficult to persuade people to do that because 90% of tsunamis happen in the Pacific, and that's where our focus of the effort is to get people to do something for other areas. For Indian Ocean, for example, would be very, very difficult.
It's coming again! Coming again!
The critical link is always on the ground at local level in making sure the message gets through.
In Bangladesh, for example, there is a cyclone warning system which involves people on bikes cycling around, blowing whistles, telling people, get to the hurricane shelters, get to the cyclone shelters to protect yourselves. And people do that. If they don't, they know they will die because we've had, in the past, enormous death tolls, hundreds of thousands of people killed in cyclones. So provided people know about the hazard, they're aware of it, they will respond to these warnings.
And experts told us today that had a Pacific-style warning system been in place, as many as 2/3 of those who lost their lives need not have died.
Phuket Town Hall is a clearinghouse for the living and the dead. Survivors are fed and registered and use the internet to reach their loved ones. On pinboards outside are the photos of those who are still missing. Helping to find Britain's missing is Ambassador to Thailand David Fall. He told me exact figures are difficult to divine.
Missing is at least in scores, and I can't really be more exact than that at the moment.
The number of injured?
Number of injured, that's in hundreds, because we've had figures of people passing through the hospitals, and they're passing through very quickly. So the figure changes every day, but that's in hundreds.
And what's the area of most critical need for British citizens at the moment?
Well, it's the fourth day. We're now into the sort of second phase of this. The first phase was identifying how big the problem was and where it was hitting and where people were. We've now had most people who've come in to tell us where they are, who's injured, who's missing, who's dead, and so on. So now the critical thing for us to do is to help these people who are still alive get back to the UK or get to wherever they're going.
At the airport, there are extra flights filled with survivors. Birgitta and Kjell Bolin hold one another close as they wait for a plane to Sweden. Wrenched apart on a Phuket beach, they faced anxious days not knowing whether the other was still alive.
I don't know anything. I think he was dead.
But you found him again. Tell me how you found him.
2 days later in the hospital. It's good now.
And you're both okay? Your injuries aren't too severe?
We are okay.
And tonight, a happy ending to the story of 2-year-old Hannes Bergström, whose plight captured the world's attention. The Scandinavian toddler was separated from his family by the wave that hit Khao Lak and was found on the side of a road, badly bitten by mosquitoes. After 4 days, he was finally reunited with his father, but his mother is still missing.
And a final word with Jeremy Bowen, who's in the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo. Jeremy, your impressions of the scale of the devastation you've seen there?
Enormous, Hugh. It's a catastrophe. I think that the people in this country and across the region will be delighted to hear that so much is in the pipeline, that so much money has been promised. The difficulty is that they need food, clean water, and shelter and safety for themselves and their families, not next month or next week. They need it tonight and tomorrow and the night after that. And if they don't get it, things around here, I think, are going to get even worse.